Welcome guys to our latest versus video. I'm Merriam, and this week I'll be playing the Naya company deck that Todd Stevens took to the semifinals last weekend at the Open in Cincinnati. So let's get right into it. As you'll see, the Naya company deck is really built around having the best rate for its mana on all of its threats and removal spells. So Wild Nacatl, Tarmogoyf, Knight of the Reliquary have among the highest power plus toughness to mana ratio of creatures in the modern format, and Lightning Bolt and Path to Exile, our primary removal spells, are the cheapest that they can be. They both cost 1 mana. So what we're really trying to do here is have all of our cards be individually very powerful while still coalescing around an aggressive game plan where we start with our early creatures, Noble Hierarch, Wild Nacatl, and move on to some of our bigger creatures. What this deck does, in addition to that, is have a fairly strong late game because of the resilience provided by cards like Voice of Resurgence and Collected Company.
So a big issue with the deck that I'm playing today in this versus video, Grixis Control, is that I'm going to have to not only deal with the early aggression of Wild Nacatl and Tarmogoyf and big creatures like Lockstone Smiter and Knight of the Reliquary, but the Naya Company deck is extremely resilient with cards like Voice of Resurgence, Collected Company, and Scavenging Ooze. Scavenging Ooze in particular is really good against all the graveyard shenanigans I have going on. Voice of Resurgence and Lockstone Smiter, for that matter, are resilient against counterspells, and Collected Company is this really powerful instant speed threat that I have to contend with.
So now we'll move on to the mana base. As we see, it's a pretty typical fetch land, dual land mana base. The one thing that might strike you as odd is the fact that we have 2 Sacred Foundries here as opposed to doubling up on one of the other shock lands. The only red card in the main deck is Lightning Bolt, so red is clearly our splash color. But Sacred Foundry is important for turning on our Wild Nacatl fully to be a 3/3. And playing 2 Sacred Foundries allows us to play 2 basic forests so that we can fetch basics early in the game for our early green cards without taking too much damage. The more interesting part of the mana base is the 4 utility lands we have here for Knight of the Reliquary. So Stirring Wildwood and Kessig Wolfrun are going to increase the deck's threat density, which is especially important against a Major's deck today, Grixis Control. Horizon Canopy allows us to gas back up a little bit if we're flooding, and then Ghost Quarter lets the deck deal with some utility lands, which won't be relevant in today's matchup, but is incredibly important in the modern format with decks like Tron, Nexus is out of Affinity, Raging Ravine out of Jund, and things like that.
That being said, I do have Creeping Tar Pits, so that can be relevant.
Okay, so that's the main deck. Come back and check out the sideboard. Okay, so here in the sideboard, we have a pretty typical array of hate cards that are common in Modern. We've got Ancient Grudge and Stony Silence against Tron and Affinity. We have Blood Moon against Tron and Amulet. Rending Volley against Twin. Spellskite against Infect and Twin and Affinity. And then Grimlawmancer and Engineer Explosives against cheap creatures. The really interesting part of this deck sideboard is the other 5 cards. We've got Kitchen Finks, which can come in on a lot of matchups, from things like Burn and Zoo to more controlling decks because it is multiple bodies for 1 card to give you some more resiliency, and then even more resiliency from these 2 Planeswalkers, Domri Raid and Elspeth Knight Errant. They're going to be especially good today because Majors is playing Grixis Control.
Yep, so if you've been following either myself or Jerry Thompson's articles or videos, you're probably pretty familiar with what I'm going to be playing today, just kind of the standard Grixis Control, no cute fluff. It's pretty boring and straightforward, but I love playing with Jace's Vryn's Prodigy, so let's do it.
I love beating down, so let's get to the battles.